I'm joined by Minister Quayle today on our briefing, and like everybody else I've seen MHK-wise for the last few days, everyone keeps handing me their paychecks, showing that they're paying into their pensions, and you yourself are carrying around one of your slips. I've got to ask you on the record here, because I mean I've been trying like everybody else to find out who this person is. Do you know who it is?
No, I genuinely don't know, Paul, who it is. I'm very disappointed in that person, because I think it's a bad day when a politician has to show a member of the public their wage slip to prove that they are being an honourable person. You know, I'm very old-fashioned, and I think if I say I'm doing something, then I expect and hope people to trust my word that I'm doing it, and therefore one of my colleagues has caused myself and the rest of my colleagues to have to prove that we are actually paying. And I know in my own pocket is my wage slip from 2012 showing that I haven't just started to pay it, but I've been paying it, you know, from its implementation.
Well, I'm surprised that it hasn't leaked in any way. I mean, I know Eddie Tears, I was overhearing talking to another journalist, and he said, hand on heart, I don't know. And this is Treasury.
Well, it's data protection, so I should. The only people that would know would be the civil servants that work in the pay department, and under data protection they can't go around telling people who it is. So we as politicians genuinely do not know who the MHK is. So our only defence mechanism is to say it's not us. And sadly, someone has chosen to be economical with the truth, and therefore, hence my colleagues are going around with wage slips.
And it's the economical bit, because presumably they are paying now, but they weren't paying maybe.
Well, no, we don't know even that. You know, I'm led to believe that that isn't the case. So, but. As I say, I don't know, but it is disappointing. I led on this in my manifesto that politicians should contribute towards their pension. I saw to it that I was appointed to the committee that decided and recommended it on the floor of the House, and I obviously paid it from day one.
Okay.
So,
well, that story is going to run for a while. We'd like to do one of your things, though, about putting up rents. Public sector houses, the rent there is going up by 5%. From April next year. Mm-hmm. What is the actual rate of inflation, first of all? I mean, this is obviously going up more than that, isn't it?
It is. The Department of Health and Social Care had a report, the Tulson report, into the rents charged on the Isle of Man, etc., and where they should be. And that report recommended actually a 10% increase for last year and this year. Now, my department, we failed to implement the means testing of the social care housing to start next year, and that's something we will have ready for the following year. But we went out for consultation with the local authorities to see what they felt there should be an increase on the charging of the rents. The majority of them came back looking for an increase. There are some highly publicised ones that said no increase, but the majority did come back to my department requesting an increase, and of the majority of the ones that requested an increase, the 5% was their recommendation. So I have accepted their viewpoint that 5% is should be an increase. So as a department, we're taking a hit of a 5% drop in income for our own stock, and we are going to implement a 5% increase.
Mandatory then, implement. Everyone has to be getting that one.
Everyone should comply. Legally, I cannot enforce local authorities to comply. However, if they choose not to comply, they can't expect the rents.
Well, it's Onken, isn't it? Didn't want to do it.
The rents that we charge, Paul, don't cover the costs. So as a result of that, the taxpayer has to give a deficiency from my budget to the local authorities.
So if Onken don't want to do it, they don't have to do it?
Well, they don't.
I mean, I'm saying Onken because there's no one in the past.
Should Onken decide not to do it, legally I can't force them to do it. However, legally under the 1955 Act, I have the powers to say, well, if you're not going to follow the recommendations of the department on your rental income, you can't expect to come to us wanting a payment for your shortfall.
Okay.
in rent. You can't, in other words, you can't have your cake and eat it. So if any local authority isn't prepared to accept the department's recommendations on a rent increase, if they've got a deficiency, which all local authorities have, Onken is maybe smaller and it's mainly towards their sheltered housing, but they can't expect to get from the taxpayer a subsidy to offset their deficiency payment and then say, well, we're not going to charge the rents, because it could well be in 10 years' time when their stock has got to a certain level that it needs significant improvement, either flattening and replacing or new roofs and walls, which we're looking at doing in Williston, then they can't suddenly turn up and say, well, we need government money to help us do this work because we haven't got enough in the kitties.
Okay.
So,
well, you've yet to hear back from them all?
Well, no, they've all responded with their recommendations on what they think the rent should be, and I've sent a letter out to them today to tell them that we're requesting a 5% increase. And I hasten to add, we don't see that money. That money goes to the local authorities. The only money I will see for the housing stock that my department is responsible for.
Because obviously public sector housing, there are people there, vulnerable people,
yep.
and they will find 5%.
No, they won't.
Harsh, no?
No, well 34% of people in the housing stock on the Isle of Man in social housing receive a benefit from the Treasury towards their rent. So the Treasury will be absorbing the 5% increase. So our most vulnerable and people on extremely low wages will not feel the impact of this increase.
So central government pays out to the local governments.
Yes.
And you'll be putting that up. So
the Treasury, who now have social security, will be increasing the allowance on housing for those people who are the most vulnerable in our society. So, and they currently help 34% of people in our housing stock. So what I'm trying to assure the listeners is that the vulnerable in our society will not be getting any impact whatsoever with the 5% increase. It's the people who are earning over a certain level.
Let's go back to means testing. It failed last time.
Yeah.
You're going back. You're going to get the necessary powers you need to sort this one out.
Well, I'm working with the Treasury to come up with a scheme that's affordable, because the last thing you want to do is have a scheme that costs more to collect the money than you actually bring in.
Have you got a timetable for this?
Yes, well, we hope, we've said for all along that we would miss the deadline for April 2015, but we would have it in place for April 2016, and we're still looking to deliver a means testing arrangement in 2016.
So we could see people, not on the streets as such, but people being told that they cannot no longer stay in those public sector houses.
Well, we've already implemented a 5-year review in public sector housing, and if you go into a public sector housing and you're on a low income, and then during the next 5 years you've done well for yourself, and 10 out of 10 for you doing well for yourself, you've got yourself on your feet, you've got employment, it's significantly more than the allowances that you need to be the level that you need to get a council house, then isn't it fair that you should move on into the market and pay the full market value that everyone else is paying to enable the next person to come in?
Both of you and me will know that there'll be headlines on certain people being caught out on this. So you accept that there'll be somebody that will fall through the net on this. But overall, you feel it's still a good idea.
Well, government can't give free house. Well, not free houses. It can't give social care houses to everyone. They are there to help people who are on low wages and the vulnerable members of our society. And I think it's not unfair that the taxpayer who are supporting this through the subsidy shouldn't be giving it a subsidy to people who are earning a significant amount of money. They are, I hasten to add, in a very small minority of our tenants in the social care housing, but they do exist.
So you're going to miss the deadline, but next year it will come in? Is
yes.
that what you're almost stating as a fact now?
That's what we are working to, is we have just slipped by 12 months.